Hello, I'm Claire Fisher, and many of you joined me this morning on the webinar on strategic thinking. We weren't able to cover all of the questions in the Q&A session, and we've had several more come in. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to run through a few of those now. Some of the questions that we didn't get to specifically were covered in the webinar, so do go back and have a look at that. So specifically, we already talked about how to find the need for strategic space when time is tight, and we also talked about the difference in the strategic frameworks in the public sector and also in the military and the private sector. Suffice to say that I do think there is something very particular about the way that we develop strategy in the public sector, and that is why we have developed our strategic space models and training to meet that need. Somebody's asked about the need to start strategy from scratch and how it fits with renewal of strategies. And I think this idea that there is always a constant process of adapting and developing and refreshing is really, really important. We don't start anything from scratch. And certainly if you look at some of the resources on my website around the policy skills, we talk always about a cycle. And I think it's right to think of strategy in a similar way, but however, having distinct phases where we do that work and where we review it is also helpful. What worries me most, to be honest, is the idea that we can finish the process of strategy and not come back to it for another 5 years. So the idea of a strategy review and a strategy refresh is really important. I've been asked a very big question around how strategic leaders operate to construct strategy that is constrained by external government resources. And I think in the public sector particularly, we often think we are particularly and uniquely constrained. And why some of the challenges that we face are unique to the public sector, the idea of there being external constraints and external factors that influence the way we put together strategy and strategic plans is exactly what strategy work in any field is all about. So yes, considering the external environment is absolutely critical, and I've recommended in the webinar the LSE tool to help you consider the external environment, particularly in regards to the public sector strategies. A question I've been asked about the incentives to public sector to develop strategic plans. Well, it depends really. There are trends with all of these things, and most government departments are meant to have strategic plans in place, and the incentives and the disincentives to that are embedded within the management practices of the departments. How effective that is and whether they actually are overridden by political imperative or ministerial whim is possibly a subject of a whole other webinar. What I would say on a practical level is when strategy works, it makes the organisations more effective. And when you're making a case for good strategy, it's better to look at organisational effectiveness and tying together the strategic direction with delivery rather than looking at incentivising strategy in itself. Tying the development of strategy too closely to incentives in terms of reward actually can be massively counterproductive, and we know this from a lot of the work around motivation, because it brings people's attention back into the now and to the winning of the reward rather than the completion of the strategy in itself. So targets and incentives around strategy can be counterproductive, but if you're in the position of needing to make the case for effective strategy, then I would suggest you turn your attention to effective organisational performance rather than the strategy as a document or as a publication in its own right. And then the final sort of set of questions really was all around engagement and stakeholder engagement, and specifically how you engage elected members and politicians. And I think this is something particular to the challenge that we face in the public sector. And actually this is really where the policy skills become the key thing. So in order, the overlap, if you like, between strategic thinking and policy skills in the public sector, and going back to the policy skills series, having a look at the policy Venn diagram, understanding that the politics, the delivery and the evidence are critical in making the link that policy is between strategy and delivery. This is where we make real progress in terms of helping the upper levels of the organisation think strategically. Somebody's also asked me about how we can, as a local authority, perhaps engage central government in developing better strategy. And this is really, again, probably something that should be the subject of a whole other webinar. The things that make it difficult, I think, are the lack of joined up communication between local authorities and the lack of joined up communication between central government. And actually this would be much better improved if there was a way for the whole of local government to speak to the whole of central government, which I think we're a long way away from, and that's often why our strategy and our strategic communications fail in that regard. So just some questions, but I think we're all demonstrating there that the need for good strategic thinking is more prevalent now than ever in the public sector. There's a lot of things to work through, a lot of skills to develop, but hopefully those things that we talked about this morning, the need to find strategic space, the need to have good information and the right tools and skills with which to apply them, will help you navigate your way through the maze that is strategic thinking, hopefully to deliver better public services that are fit for the future. Thank you for watching.